Hello everyone and welcome to this week's Secrets of Flow. I'm Alexei Zheglov, speaking live from my place in the sunny Toronto, Canada. It's Friday, March 7th, 2025, 8 o'clock in the morning where I am. Different Friday hour in the time zone where you're at. Thank you everyone for watching. This is a new time slot that I started in February and moved this weekly routine to. Still trying to make it work, and so far the plan is that I will stick with it. Today's topic, I titled it A Minimum Viable Process. And the title kind of reveals a dilemma that many of us face in the workplace as we try to get better at what we do and how we deliver various products and services to customers. On one hand, we really want to focus just on ourselves, our colleagues, and our customers and our work. We just want to get things done. We just do them. At the same time, we do need some kind of order rather than chaos. We want to do better than just an ad hoc definition of the process. I should probably plug in a quote at this time by the famous, W. Edwards Deming. If you can't describe what you do as a process, you don't really know what you're doing. So Deming's point was essentially that we need to understand something just well enough to improve it, right? So we always want to improve it because customers and markets always want more. That's a general trend. So by the way, books like this one, this is one of Deming's famous books, The New Economics, kind of book about all kinds of motivation and strategies for improving business, government, people's lives and careers, and so on. Such books are never too far out of reach for me. I can get most of them without getting up at my place. So we do want to have some kind of understanding, some kind of description or definition of the process, but at the same time, a lot of us face the extreme in our actual workplace. There is some kind of process improvement group that produces a lot of documentation. There's a lot of complicated diagrams, lots of documents about how the process for this and for this, for development of that product or for delivery of this service or for prioritizing this and that type of request is supposed to work, exists, and it's sometimes the full-time job for someone to maintain it. And then all this documentation is stored somewhere, like, let's say, a file server or some kind of intranet in our company, and no one actually looks at that. And it kind of defeats the purpose of all that work that these people do about the process. So first off, I would like to resolve the seeming contradiction right away in a simple way that has always worked for me. I'd say we have to start with the very definition of what the process is. And my very simple definition is it's what people actually do. It's not a diagram, it's not boxes and arrows, it is not in some electronic or printed document that is stored somewhere where no one looks at it. It is what people actually do, and we should simply accept it for what it is with all of its imperfections. People being of course not perfectly rational beings, can make a lot of emotional and sometimes biased decisions as far as what work to start, what work to finish, what work to advance, how to approach it, and so on and so forth. So they actually do it, and sometimes it isn't consistent, but it is what it is. And this is a very useful frame because for various managers and their trusted advisors in some process improvement or quality management or excellence office, they can simply study the process the way it is with somewhat scientific mindset, examine it, understand how it really works, so that then we can perhaps pull one of its levers, one of its little wheels, change it, and change it for the better. And of course, be sure to validate that it actually got better. So what I'm thinking about is just some minimum amount of information and knowledge that we would need about how we actually work. And we probably won't be able to find it out in every detail, but we need to know just enough so that we can improve it. And by improvement, I mean some outcome that matters to our customers. They would be happier, to our business, it would be more profitable or secure, and to our people who actually do and manage all the work. They'd be less stressed out, burned out, happier, and so on. So let's try to figure out this sort of minimally viable process, the minimum small set of things that we do need to pay attention to. And now that I said this, it turns out I don't really have to say much more other than to reference several things that I already said on this broadcast in its earlier episodes. So let's have a look. Several weeks ago, we talked about how to map your process as one of the examples of one of the maps from one of the processes where it identifies several activities and a different collaboration pattern for each. And this is kind of a general diagram, how this particular diagramming technique extends to pretty much every intellectual process. Here's a particular example for software industry, and here's kind of a hint how you could go from, let's say, this sort of diagram on the left to, let's say, a visual management or a Kanban board on the right. And in this particular chapter of the Secrets of Flow, we basically talked about how to identify the key activities in the process. And the important detail that matters to us today is there should be only a few such activities. And there are two kinds of mistakes you can make here. One mistake is to have just one activity doing. That doesn't tell us much. So if some problem happens, which it always does, somewhere in one of the stages of the process, we won't really know where exactly it happened between the start and the end, because all we have between the start and the end is doing. The opposite kind of mistakes that I've seen people make is that they make overly detailed maps, sometimes with 20 or 30 stages in the process. And folks, let me tell you, I have not seen any of these people being able to maintain a visual management system with 20 or 30 columns and move cards across it for very long, let alone get any meaningful insight out of it. However, when we noticed some changes in collaboration activity between the major activities in the process, the dominant activities, this is very useful information because we can map a stretch of the process which involve multiple activities, but but perhaps what the word activity means to any of the participants. However, it's just one stretch of the process where we expect to collaborate, to depend with, let's say, another team or a vendor or some external group. And we can expect to run into some delays, and there may be some type of problems to solve. And then there may be a stretch of the process where we expect no such problem to occur because the work is, let's say, more contained within our team. And then there may be another stretch of the process where we have a similar collaboration or dependency pattern, but with a very different group. So the problems of the first type, again, will not likely to occur there, but the problems of some other type. And so we just mapped the process by breaking it up into several meaningful stages where we expect problems of a certain kind, and then by solving those problems we will improve the process. So a handful of activities, that's the key to let's say making this process map simpler and making it, yet keeping it actionable. At this point, I should probably say a few things about how we can fit our minimally viable process into our brain. Well, without pretending to be an expert in how our brain really works, so I'm kind of a novice who, well, if you gave me a task to create a PowerPoint presentation to present to my colleagues, well, I'd probably not make too big of a mess out of it. And one of the rules that of presentations that many of you probably know if you had to make a presentation to speak about something in front of your colleagues is to keep each slide very simple. You typically have a title and then you have a very short list under the title. Maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 really important things that you need to mention. And so this is a very basic pattern. We take one concept and we break it down into several others, like maybe 3, 4, 5, but not 20. You know what I'm talking about. If you see 20 bullet points on a PowerPoint slide, well, no one can understand this. And so that's an interesting observation about how our minds work. We're very good at breaking down one concept into several, a handful, maybe 5 plus minus. And we're very good at connecting one particular concept or area of knowledge with perhaps 5, give or take, adjacent areas. And so that particular example, mapping the process where it contains, the map contains several stretches, several dominant activities, but more than one, multiple, and at the same time not too many, not 20 or 30, right? That was key to effectiveness of that particular mapping technique. Well, a bit further on the show, in a different episode, we also talked about, I want to get rid of this black box. For some reason, my streaming software actually doesn't want to somehow tolerate more than one camera, so so the camera from a different angle, I just want to get rid of it. So I'll just simply show some stuff without my face on the screen for a few minutes. So we talked a bit about multiple sources of demand when just some group of teams in a company handles, let's say, demand coming from different customers, different market segments, different stakeholders in their company, demand that is somewhat differentiated by its business risk, and there must be a way, and we talked about that, how to represent it in some kind of work management system using different work item types. So in general, we at least should be able to differentiate between value demand, failure demand, internally sourced demand for improvement, sometimes speculative demand when we're actually working not on something we aim to deliver to customers, but we're just perhaps developing a prototype so that we can learn about our business opportunities. And when it comes to value demand, there may be, again, multiple customer segments in the markets that you're trying to serve, multiple perhaps stakeholders or business units that your product, project, or service group delivers to. Sometimes demand can shift seasonally and so on and so forth. So there is always some variety in it, and we can represent that variety by declaring, defining several work item types in our process model. So folks, for those of you who have tried Kanban, who have had some experience setting up Kanban boards, you may have noticed that the typical board, visual board, usually looks like a kind of matrix of columns and rows. Columns are for activities, and rows are for different kinds of demand, for things that we perhaps do differently because they are different in nature. They come from different sources, such as different customers, market segments, and so on. And so the matrix is simply a realization that we've got two geometric dimensions to work on, to work with when we represent the moving model of our work on a typical computer screen or on the whiteboard. And we may as well use one of these dimensions, the horizontal dimension, for flow. So it shows progression of activities from left to right, from start to finish. And we could use the other dimension, the vertical dimension, to represent the variety, the different risks, the different customers, markets, different kinds of demand, and so on. And so the simplest and not particularly effective example of this matrix, when it's a one-to-one matrix, one-on-one matrix, one-by-one matrix, it doesn't really tell us much. There's only one pixel in each dimension, and it's a gray pixel. There's only one activity doing, and there's only one type of work, which is ticket, or Jira, or whatever you call it. So we have a one-by-one matrix, and there is one gray pixel. Well, that is not a very informative picture. However, if we had, let's say, 3, maybe 5 pixels in the horizontal dimension, those are our activities, and we had maybe 3 or 5 in the vertical dimension, those are our types of work, the picture begins to look more interesting, and perhaps we can even get some insight out of it. All right. Another interesting monologue I had on this show is about decision points. upstream of the commitment point where we make some decision to actually start or to commit to some kind of work, and how multiple decision points exist there. Sometimes commitment to doing is different than commitment to start. Sometimes there's a decision to promote or discard some idea for a good reason, which may have something to do with a market risk or with technical risk. Sometimes there's a decision when there's a lot of competing ideas, which one should we explore first, and when is the optimal time to do that. So multiple decision points may exist here rather than a single decision point where you bring absolutely every idea and try to prioritize everything. And then we also had a session earlier on the show about time and process as a metric and what can possibly affect it. So here's at the bottom, actually I should actually switch to the proper view where I'm showing this. Yes, where at the bottom we have let's say a distribution chart of time and process, and at the top we have a basic visual board where actually some of the geometry of the board and some of the colored blockers attached to work item cards, and those blockers come in different colors, potentially indicating different sources of delay that show up kind of in the right hand side, the tail of the distribution of time and process. So multiple sources of delay, understanding where they are. It could be dependencies on other groups, dependency on a rarely available shared specialist or some shared piece of equipment. Sometimes it's rework, sometimes it's preemption. There may be several other typical sources of delay that the work is exposed to in your process. Being aware of them is, of course, very important, because that's an important step in actually solving those problems. And I should also say something about what else? Fitness criteria. Maybe it's about how fast your process can deliver to customers, how predictably. It may also be about the functional quality of the product or service you're delivering. When customers get something from you, they open the box, what do they find in it? Does your product have a button that, if I push it, something happens, it performs some function that matters to customers? And sometimes it's non-functional quality. It's the how it does it, and sometimes how reliable it is, or some other quality that matters to customers. Usually a quality that's a lot harder to attain than to just add another form or another button. And these fitness criteria have some implications on how you approach managing and improving your process, what your people actually do. For example, if it's about time, it's about its duration or predictability, then you have to understand the sources of delay and deal with them. When it comes to functional quality, you have to get better at selecting what you actually build in your process. So it's an improvement of an intake and prioritization process. Maybe it's increasing the frequency with which you actually make such decisions. Faster frequency generally means you gain some flexibility as far as how you make those decisions, and that can translate into better selection decisions. And when it comes to non-functional quality, this is usually that non-instantly available specialist having very deep expertise that you need that you need to interact with as you try to deliver your work. So how do you manage cross-team, cross-department, and sometimes across vendors, work relationships, and avoid the unproductive delays while getting the top-notch non-functional quality that you need? That is the name of the game. But knowing multiple fitness criteria helps absolutely. And folks, last but not least, I should say, there is a notion of feedback loops, and how often you look at, think about, reflect, look at some metrics perhaps, look at some customer surveys that are produced by your process. That matters too. And with respect to some of the elements of your process, such as, let's say, intake, it could be one frequency of meeting and discussing and reflecting and choosing a course of action with one set of participants. And when it comes to, let's say, mitigating some sources of delay downstream, that could be a different cadence with a different set of participants. So you can have multiple feedback loops, and sometimes these feedback loops are kind of the first order that just adjust your process slightly, and sometimes they are of a deeper kind of second order where it really changes your entire approach. So, I've been talking for 27 minutes, and I'd like to summarize that the key word out of everything I said today is probably multiple, or several, or a few. A few activities from start to finish in your process, multiple sources of demand that send work into your process. Those could be customers, stakeholders, market segments, and whatnot. There could be multiple decision points rather than one big decision point where you prioritize everything. Multiple decision points where you filter out various ideas that are not as good to promote the ones that are better. Where you make some partial and full commitments. There could be multiple sources of delay downstream once your work is in progress, and each of them may require a different tactical approach. There could be multiple fitness criteria that matter to your customers, that you're trying to hit those criteria. And multiple feedback loops may be needed in order to keep this process under control, keep it on track, make slight adjustments, and sometimes make big changes. And that kind of brings me back to that point about my rudimentary understanding how my brain works, is that I just broke this basic definition of a process into several areas, and then it turns out in each area there are multiple things to pay attention to. So basically I took this from one to several pattern, breaking down the concept into several parts, or connecting one concept to several adjacent concepts. And I took it 2 levels deep, but not 3 levels deep. And this may already be enough. And pushing it any further may really overload our brain and distract us from doing the actual work. And that may be the reason why process maps with 20 or 30 stages weren't particularly effective when we tried them. That may be why 32 items in the drop down to select type of work when you enter a new ticket into your work management system. Basically, the manager of that system, well, let's say, prioritize the meeting with me so that they can figure out how to collapse those 32 categories to 5. Multiple decision points. A few decision points that are clear, not a single decision point, and not an analysis paralysis. And that's, and so on and so forth. The words are on your screen. And whenever we pushed it too far in one of these categories, such as, let's say, too many types of work or too many workflow activities, we often neglected certain things closer to the bottom of this list. The feedback loops and the fitness criteria. So going too far in any of these 6 categories can actually have a negative effect on depth in some other of these categories, and that's where the entire attempt to improve the process, to improve our outcomes, the happiness of our customers, of our people, of our business, may be compromised. So, once again, the keyword is several or multiple of these things, and within each, several key points to pay attention to. This is something we perhaps need to keep in our brain, but I wouldn't push it as far as to say we really need more detail, or else we can't improve. This was it for this week. Thank you very much for watching or listening live or as a recording. See you next Friday. Have a great weekend. At some point during the weekend, I will post annotations, timestamps on the YouTube channel, and maybe a summary post on LinkedIn. And I'll also choose a topic for the next Friday. Again, have a great weekend, everyone, and goodbye.